Thanks for joining today's episode. Today we are going to talk about things that you may buy during engineering school and engineering GPA. So, Mike, do you want to kick us off?
First thing that we would buy, this might have been one of the first things that I bought in engineering. I had to do it like first year, freshman year. Engineering paper. Did you use engineering paper?
I did use engineering paper for freshman year, and I really did not use it after.
Same here, basically. But I had so much engineering paper during freshman year that I had to use it after, otherwise it would go to waste.
I think they
had like
hype it up a
sets and
lot.
sets and sets of engineering paper. It's this, if you don't know what it is, it's this like yellow paper. I posted a video about it, and people were saying sometimes it's green, that they like green
I think
paper.
mine was green.
I had yellow,
And I think it came in like 180 sheet type binder folder type thing.
for me, it was a pad. It was like a pad.
Yeah, it was
So
a
you had
pad. It was a
you had
pad
paper.
of like 180 sheets. I think.
And then there's like this sticky thing at the top of it, and all the paper was attached to the sticky thing, and you kind of just pull the
tear 'em
paper
off,
out.
yeah.
3 rings. There were 3 rings, so I put like leftovers in a binder to have like record of all of my homeworks in like a binder, so I would be able to reference it in the future just for organization.
But the thing is, do you use it? And it seems like our experience was really fresh. They hype it up, or I don't know. It seems to be
They
hyped
as
up
in
a
who?
lot.
Like the professors that you had freshman year?
Whenever you're trying to learn about engineering, when you're going into it freshman year, you just see it mentioned a lot. I guess you just not a specific person or group of people, but it's just you see it mentioned so much that you think it's the super important thing, which it is. But then after freshman year, it seems like a lot of students really don't touch it that much.
Yeah, I think I literally had to use it freshman year for my first year engineering homework. Like it was like, I don't know what the consequences were. I wouldn't be surprised if like looking back, it was like that homework wouldn't count if you didn't do it on engineering paper. Maybe that was it. I don't know if I forget. But I had to use it. It was like a rule.
And then
you must do your homework on engineering paper.
afterwards, when your professors are more specific to your major, what I found is that it's really up to them.
Yeah, but I think this goes to like you first year engineering, they tell you have to do stuff, and then after first year engineering, you no longer have to.
Well,
But I personally carried a lot of what they made me do in first year engineering. I just was doing that after.
But I think there's a lot of good habits that you can pick up early on, even from like say high school or elementary school. If you learned how to take notes, or if you developed a note taking method, like learned a method of taking notes that works well for you, that's other habits that you can carry on. Otherwise,
just to add, before we go on to the other thing we buy, just because this is on my mind right now as we're talking about it, one of the habits, I don't know if you've done this, that I carried on was the structure for solving problems, like mechanics problems, and doing those free body diagrams and the force drawings, and writing out assumptions, writing out information given, and writing out like how I was going to model the problem before actually solving it. Those were things that I had to do in first year engineering on top of engineering paper that we were talking about.
I think if you're able to solve problems very structured, being able to show the structure and your logic on paper is really important, probably.
It's important, but I'm just saying that's like what I had
That's
to
what
do
you
that.
one thing
I
that
had
you learned.
well,
and
I had to do it in first year engineering, and then kept doing it later on, and it was super helpful. So if they make you do stuff in first year engineering, there's probably like a rhyme or reason to it that it maybe be easier or faster if you get rid of it later on, but it could be good habits to keep. But let's keep going on. Next thing, what
we have a calculator.
what kind of calculator?
Calculator that can handle complex numbers, imaginary numbers.
I called that an imaginary calculator. That's how I think about it simply.
If you go in, we'll link the videos, the 2 topics, the calculator and GPA. We'll link some videos in the show description. But we're not going to go into specifics because you can see in the comments there's a lot of debate over what's a good calculator. Everybody has their own opinion. But a lot of cases in engineering, imaginary numbers come into play.
Yeah, so that's when you're dealing with where you have to like solve things like 1 plus I, and you have to like solve like the roots.
I actually did have to buy that comes up in say circuits too, like when you're dealing with AC circuits. But if you study electrical engineering, but one case too, I actually had to buy another calculator. I did a business minor, and I had to buy. I was in, I believe it was it was an accounting or financial class, and I don't want to spend the time thinking of the name, but I had to buy a calculator that had specific financial
I think it's
calculations.
like net present value calculator,
Yeah,
right? Where you have to calculate the net present value, future value.
So that was a calculator that I needed specifically for one class to just be able to do calculations.
So basically, like you might encounter some classes in your major, outside of your major, for like electives or something like that, and they may see like you need this very specific tool to help you a lot in the class.
And you'll probably even though run into classes where on the exams they'll say no calculator allowed
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
So that's interesting. But otherwise, another question we have or topic, and we're going to wrap this up quick, is GPA. Because GPA is an interesting topic because with engineering, it's a difficult major, and your GPA, you may look at one major that's not engineering, and you can say, oh, this is a good GPA. And that good GPA could be a lot more difficult to achieve in engineering. So
Like a 3.8 in engineering is different than a 3.8 in like another major, business, for example, accounting we mentioned before, another major. And there's nothing wrong with like different majors,
nothing wrong with it.
but engineering is
It's just
difficult.
It's just the way it's interpreted.
You very well might have like a class average of a 30% on your exams.
And a company may look at an employer to the one thing in the video I made this week that did well was mentioning how your GPA, especially within engineering, and say you want to go into industry, could not necessarily, you can't really replace your GPA, but you can make up for a lower GPA with practical experience.
I think it's like flooding your resume. You flood your resume with so much other good stuff that no one cares about your GPA. Yeah, I have a good example about this. Okay, let me just thought exercise, and I'll ask you this question hypothetically. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Recently, today is, I think it's May 17th or something like that. May 17th, 2025. I don't know when people are going to watch this video. I recently saw an article that Purdue University undergraduate students created a robot to solve a Rubik's Cube and broke the Guinness Book of World Records. Would you work on the team that breaks a world record by designing a robot to do something cool? Like, I'll do it specifically. Rubik's Cube. I'm just saying, would you want to design a Rubik's Cube machine to solve a Rubik's Cube and break the Guinness Book of World Records and have a 3.5 GPA? Or would you not have that experience and not have any other experiences on your resume, but have a 4.0 for engineering?
I would rather have a 3.0 in that experience than a 4.0.
So not even a 3.5.
Not even a 3.5. I mean, if you get a 3.5 in engineering, that's pretty good.
I think, okay.
I would rather have that experience plus a 3.0 than a 4.0, but not an experience that really doesn't come close to that.
Because that's such like that's like a really cool thing to talk about. This is assuming like you're able to talk about your experiences on the project. It's balancing in classroom excellence with out of classroom excellence.
Right.
And ultimately you want to optimize those two. And having all of one and none of the other is usually like a non-optimal situation. You usually, because think about it this way, like area of a square. If you have like a rectangle, like, you know what I mean? You want to balance all the sides.
And I think too, when I think of balance, some people, what you're saying is really good. You're balancing your resume between the GPA. Like, I don't want a 4.0 GPA, but like, is a 4.0 GPA doesn't mean anything if you're looking for a job, but you have no other experience
to talk about. What are you going to talk about in a resume?
So, and that's a theoretical question, but hypothetical.
This is like the area thing that I was going to give about though. When you have a rectangle versus a square, if you have to hold the same perimeter, okay, and let's say the perimeter is 20 units, you can have a rectangle that is 8 units long and 2 units wide. Okay, so an 8x2 rectangle, and that is an area of 16 square units. But you can also, with the same perimeter, or let's use perimeter as time, have a square of 5, side length 5, and that area is 25. That's much more than 16, right? So when you optimize things, squares, like the square figure has a lot larger of an area because its sides, the length and the width are more balanced, rather than a rectangle. It'll have a smaller area even though it has the same perimeter. That's what I mean by balancing things out. If you look at length and width as like in classroom involvement and out of classroom involvement, you want a nice balance between the two to optimize your candidate profile and to really stand out. That's where I was saying, like, not a 4.0, but a 3.5 with not no experience, but this Guinness Book of World Record. Maybe that was like an extreme experience, right? But like, you know what I
But
mean?
so the point. So let's work the math out. A 5x5 square is 25
Square units.
versus a
8x2 rectangle, which is 16 square units, but it have the same perimeter. The side lengths are constrained by the same constraints, yet you're able to have much greater area coverage
And for those that aren't
for the
following,
balance.
if you look at the square and it's 5 units on each side, that's 5 units times 4 sides is 20 units in perimeter. But then if you look at a rectangle that has 2 sides which are 8 units and 2 sides which are 2 units, that's 8 + 8 is 16 + 2 + 2 20. So it's 20 is the units is the perimeter for either one, but the area of that square is larger. That's an interesting analogy. And I think what's interesting, another thing too that came to mind is when it comes to just experience, you can balance out experience types as well. Some students will say, well, what could I do for a personal project? And if personal projects aren't up your alley, but you can get like an internship and research experience and club experience, that's still a variety of experience. So you don't have to do all the different types of experience. I think what's most important is you go into what's sort of interests you and you just get a variety of things and show good experience. But the topic was GPA. So what other things are important when you think about the GPA? I think it's what is your actual discipline? Because some discipline, this is a little less important, but some disciplines tend to be harder than others. And so that's something maybe you take into account.
For reference, you studied electrical engineering. I studied industrial engineering. How many physical labs did you have to do for electrical engineering? Like how many lab classes?
There's quite a few.
Basically, at what, every semester or every semester plus multiple?
One, maybe, I don't know, it was quite a few, 4+.
I think I had 2 lab classes.
Yeah.
One of which was like a really hardcore lab where I had to actually do lab write-ups. So like I think I had one class where I had to do like actually go somewhere, build something, test it, and write up a lab in regards to like introduction, results, methods, process, all like methods, process, results, conclusion, that type of like a lab report. I think there was like one class that
I think it's also important to say, though, even though you look at this difference in difficulty, perceived difficulty that people tend to express, it doesn't necessarily mean that one's any more valuable than the other. Because when you look at number one, engineering as a whole, they're all difficult. No matter what way you put it, they're all difficult. And a lot of schools, too, publish reports for salaries that students get after graduating. And all of the disciplines tend to report fairly good salaries, too. So even this perceived difficulty doesn't really, at the end of the day, when you look at the outcome and the salary and what you're earning after you graduate, all of them have strong earning potential as well.
And take the average salaries with like a grain of salt because we were talking about this the other day. Average salary for whenever you're looking at your major for average salary, that is like the average, the sum divided by the count of all of these different salaries from different companies, from different industries with different levels of experience in different geographical areas. Like the same job in a high cost of living area compared to the same exact job at the same company at a lower cost of living area could be 25% different. Like that's the difference between a $75,000 a year job and a $100,000 a year job. Simply same company, same role, just a different cost of living. We're not even talking about different companies, different industries, like industries that are known to pay very high salaries versus industries that are known to pay lower salaries. And it doesn't include the benefits with like that's getting into a different conversation.
If you were to take just an example, one industry and all the majors, find them jobs in that industry, they all could be earning similar amounts. And that's just a generalized example. But back to GPA, what do we think is a good GPA?
For me, like my head was always 3.0 or above. Like I need a 3. I need a 3. I never got close to like lower, like really close to like a 3. My lowest semester was first semester freshman year. I had a 3.5 and I was not very pleased with it because it was my very first semester in college coming in from high school. And obviously you're adjusting, you were getting involved. I was involved. I mean, you know that. I was involved like right away. on campus. I knew exactly what orgs to get involved in, was really involved in them right away. So there was some balancing act going on there. But 3.5 was generally 3.5 was like my lowest GPA, and then I kept going up from there because really so I said 3.0, don't want to go lower than that, but like target 3.5 and above to be like impressive and to be good in engineering.
Can we talk for 5 more minutes?
Yeah.
So basically, I think that GPA, I was always, my strategy freshman year was, I always thought I need a good internship. As early as freshman year, I was thinking I need a good job after graduation. I know a good internship will lead to a good job after graduation. And so how do I get an internship? Well, I have no experience, but what could I do to stand out? And my logic was if I can get a really high GPA, that's a way to stand out. So I ended up putting a lot of emphasis on that. And it worked because there was some comments at career fairs. Oh, you have a good GPA.
And getting like as much as we talk about engineering being hard, like engineering, it can be competitive because you're like you have to find out ways to stand out to get jobs. I think some of the great atmospheres though are collaborative. You want to be driven to be your best version of yourself while also collaborating with other people. I'm not saying like have this like I mean some people, you and I are both like, well, anyways, not gonna go there, but
I think that GPA overall, though, is important. My take is, if you can get a 3.0, I think that's solid.
But you want it to be as best as you can.
You want it to be as best as you can. And the thing is that there's above a 3.0 is generally solid. If you can get above a 3.85, I think that's really good. And if you can get above like 3.7 or 3.8, you're in really, really, really strong but rare territory.
I think the partitions, like you said, I probably agree with the partitions. Above 3 is like, I said this right in the beginning. That's the baseline target.
Yeah.
Get it like above 3 point something. That's the baseline target. And then from our perspective. And then 3.5 and above, good.
That's really good.
All right, good. And then I think rather than 3, I think 3.8 and above would start to be in that like rare territory. But also when you're at that 3.8 and above, I heard somebody or maybe read somewhere or saw something where it was concerning about having a super high GPA in engineering because what else are you doing? So like to me, like you want it to be as good as you can. If you're doing amazing things outside of the classroom and you have like a 3.9, a 3.95, maybe a 4.
I think the concern is some people will say, "Oh, there's this concern you're not able to operate in a workplace, or you're not social enough, or you don't have any other skills, things like that." If you have above like a 3.8 or like a 4.0, but I think there's two things I think going on there. One, I think I think you can still demonstrate these skills. Just because you have a high GPA doesn't mean you can't have those skills that are important. And also, just because you do have a high GPA doesn't mean you don't have those skills. So it's a little bit flawed logic, and I think there might be some students who maybe wish they had a higher GPA who regurgitate that statement to maybe make up for it. But I would say never try to have a lower GPA just because you don't want to appear.
You want it to be as high.
You want a strong GPA, but like we were talking about before, you want the strong overall experience section though on your resume.
Yeah, an optimized candidate profile that optimizes and maximizes what you can do inside the classroom and outside the classroom.
And I think too, it's important though to note companies do have minimums. So while we're saying this, our opinions on where our opinions are is coming from the perspective of, if we see this GPA, this is our initial reaction. Like my initial reaction, it's pretty solid. Or my initial reaction, if you're sitting at a 3.6, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And if you're sitting at above a 3, my initial reaction. But companies do have minimums.
Some companies could have very high minimums. Other companies can.
Some are 3.5.
And I think some
3.2, 3.3. It could be anything.
And I again can't speak for companies on this, but there could be companies who have minimum GPAs across majors. Like we started this off like this kind of topic saying engineering GPA is a little different than other majors. Well, I mean, I in my experience, I haven't seen a company like partition minimum requirement for engineering GPA is this and another GPA is this. I haven't seen that. I don't think I've seen that.
And you
I
might
don't think I've
also
seen that.
see the differences in how companies enforce that and how lenient they are. For example, how much all depends on company and probably. And the thing too is that GPA is just one part of the resume. So if there's one point I'd like to close out with, and you can follow up with your thoughts on however you want to close out. I think GPA and education section on your resume is one of the smallest sections for a reason. That's what I like to say. And that the rest of your resume is made up of practical skills, shows those skills and experiences. That's what makes up the bulk of your resume, and it's like that for a reason.
Yeah, just to close this out, because I think you mentioned having a high GPA to get internships. When you're doing it, I had like the reverse. Not that reverse is in like not like a so let me clarify what I mean by that is I wanted to make the earlier the earlier semesters of my college experience a little bit more academically light and overload the academic intensity on the towards the end of my college experience because I wanted to spend a lot of time and effort gaining industry skills and industry connections to get industry experiences and internships and co-ops because I understood the strength that those would the value that that would bring to my resume so that if my GPA ended up being lower after taking higher or more intense semesters later, I would be able to fall back on having industry experiences. So I think we've kind of talked about like two ends, like prioritizing GPA to get internships and industry experience versus focusing on getting industry experiences so that my perspective was if I could focus on landing really, really good, really high quality internships and co-ops, I would have to worry less about my GPA because then I can always go back on my
Like the
industry
Rubik's
experiences and
Cube.
co-ops.
Like the Rubik's Cube.
Exactly, like having that project, having those extra experiences that would be so great that they would overwhelm my GPA on
Whatever
the
it could be.
resume, which my GPA was above a 3.9 in engineering. So like, it's not like I needed to overwhelm it, but it's not like, even now, it's like not something that like when I talk about my college experience, it's not focused on my GPA, even though that was really good because I had a lot of other really great stuff that I was able to do in college for gaining experiences and having cool experiences.
Amazing. Well, thank you for joining, and let us know what you'd like to talk about, what you'd like us to talk about next time.
Thanks.